Coming up on Network Africa, 130 civilians killed by jihadists in Mali. Zimbabwe healthcare workers strike over wages and inflation crisis. Plus, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa denies interference over a corruption report. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olaride. We begin in Mali, where more than 130 civilians have been killed by jihadists in 3 neighboring towns over the weekend. A group called Makina Katiba is being blamed for this attack. This group is affiliated to Al-Qaeda in the Diala Sagu and 2 other localities in central Mali's Mopti region, all in a separate jihadist attack on Saturday near the city of Goa. Regional officials say at least 20 civilians were killed. Mali has been battling a decade-long insurgency that has affected millions of people and has also engulfed other countries in the region. It's less than 2 months to the general elections in Kenya, and candidates have been ramping up their campaigns across the country. The alliance led by Kenyan presidential candidate Raila Odinga says it will come down hard on corruption if it wins the election in August. Well, this is according to Mr. Odinga's running mate, Martha Karua, a 64-year-old former justice minister who promises to fight corruption to ensure the public resources benefit all Kenyans and not just a few individuals.
Martha Karua says the coalition of Kenyan presidential candidate Raila Odinga will prioritize the fight against corruption if it wins in August to fund its social interventions program and development. The 64-year-old was picked as running mate by Odinga last month, completing the ticket of the Azimio coalition that is facing off with Deputy President William Ruto in the poll scheduled for August 9. She was, however, focused on the top issues in the campaign.
Corruption is strangling or choking the nation in terms of delivery of services, economic growth. In every area, corruption is choking the nation. We need to release the resources available, both financial and otherwise. Debt is not bad per se if it's used for the purpose. But in a country with deep-seated problems of corruption, it ends up that quite a portion of the debt will not be applied for the intended purposes, and therefore repayment becomes a burden and becomes too onerous for us. I think my principle has already explained it, and our manifesto says it, that our intention is to structure, to renegotiate the debts and make them long-term so that we are able to meet our debt obligations as well as meet the needs of the people, including development.
Karau, a former justice minister who earned herself the nickname Iron Lady for tackling all comers in the male-dominated political landscape, would join a select club of top female leaders on the continent if Azimio wins.
I think that's just a demonstration that leadership and strong leadership in women is seen as the exception, not the norm. Because I haven't heard of iron men. You see, a strong man is seen as the norm. But if a woman comes in strongly, she has to have names. And if you're not being called iron, you'll be called abrasive. A man will be called strong. You'll be called vocal. A man will be called vocal, you'll be called loud. So those are some of the things. It just shows that we are yet to normalize.
If elected, Karau will become the first ever deputy president in the East African nation, joining an elite league of women leaders on the 54-nation continent, which has so far seen just 9 substantial or acting female presidents.
In Zimbabwe, healthcare workers have gone on strike to compel the government to pay their salaries in US dollars as spiraling inflation has eroded the purchasing power of their take-home pay. Well, the country's nurses, doctors, pharmacists, radiologists, and other medical professionals did not turn up for work on Monday in an action that strike organizers has described as a huge success. Well, many of the workers had demonstrated outside Zimbabwe's main hospitals in the capital, Harare, which is one of the country's largest referral hospitals, and Sally Mugabe Central Hospitals, also in the capital, demanding better salaries. Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamutumbu joins us now for more discussions on this. Hello, Nigel. Good to see you.
Yes, thank you. Pleasure being here.
Well, tell us more about this strikes action by medical professionals in Zimbabwe. This is not the first time that, the workers have been demanding better working conditions and a better pay.
Yes, this is day 2 of the strike by the health workers, and which has also now grown from yesterday, which was day 1, to today, where we are seeing more of the health workers joining in, some junior doctors, nurses, and other health workers in the line of the health service delivery system also joining it. So, and I don't think it will be resolved anytime soon. They have been seeking audience with the health minister, who happens to be the vice president. And according to them, that has not happened. But we also know government has put on record that they can't dollarize. So it's going to be a stalemate, because on one hand, the healthcare workers, they want to be paid in US dollars. On the other hand, government is adamant that it can only but partially pay US dollar. It can't fully dollarize, not at this stage.
Also, help us understand this, the effect of the spiraling inflation that has led these workers to be asking for their salaries in dollars.
Yes, what's actually been happening is, especially due to the increase in the prices of oil and the increase in the prices of commodities, which is now been going up in US dollar terms. And what that makes it even difficult now for those that are earning in the local currency, which has been struggling to be stable against the US dollar. So it's really a double-edged sword on the part of the workers, who on one hand, prices are going up in US dollar terms, yet the money that they are receiving in salary is also dwindling against the very same US dollar. So it's really a crisis which has to be addressed fundamentally by re-injecting and investing the much needed foreign currency and providing some reprieve, whether it's going to be taxes or whatever a mechanism that needs to be done to ensure that the prices in US dollars are kept at an optimum, and that the prices of oil, which has been driving the increase and inflation in Zimbabwe, is addressed urgently.
All right, Nigel, just finally, you said, the workers have been seeking an audience with the health minister, but there's been none so far. But has there been any response from, maybe other government officials?
Yes, there has been an official pronouncement by the public service minister, who has indicated that they would want to give the ongoing negotiations a chance. They have been negotiating with a body of various trade unions. There is an apex council that brings together the government, the trade unions, and their various representatives and so on. But the situation is a little tricky in that various sectors have various demands, and have bare minimum demands which cannot necessarily be dealt with as a uniform. For example, health workers are also crying about the shortages of medicines, shortages of equipment that is required in hospitals, and so on. And therefore, they cannot wait for the collective bargaining platform. They need audience with the relevant line ministry that deals with health. So we anticipate the vice president to pronounce himself on the matter, because the pronouncements thus far by the public service minister have not been satisfactory.
All right then, Nigel, we do hope for a quick resolution to this, because it's, I'm sure it's having a very huge impact on the people and, you know, patients at the hospital. But thank you so much, Nigel Yamutumbu, a Zimbabwean journalist.
Pleasure.
Over in North Africa, President of Tunisia, Kais Saied, has received the first draft of a new constitution under his own timeline. President Saied has until June 30th to approve or edit the draft constitution, and that's less than a month ahead of the referendum planned for July 25th. The planned referendum marks 1 year since the power grab by President Saied that saw him sack the government and suspend an elected parliament. The president wants to replace the current constitution, the product of a hard-won 2014 compromise between bitter political rivals, but which enshrined a mixed parliamentary presidential system that often produced political deadlock. The revised constitution is at the center of the president's program for rebuilding Tunisia's political system, more than a decade after the revolution that sparked the Arab Spring uprising. Staying with Tunisia, the country's coast guards have retrieved the bodies of 4 migrants whose boats sank off the port city of Sfax. Security officials say the bodies recovered in Skira were already decomposing. In recent months, dozens of people have drowned off the Tunisian coast, with an increase in the frequency of attempted crossings to Europe from Tunisia and Libya towards Italy. Hundreds of thousands of people have made this perilous journey in recent years, many of them fleeing conflict and poverty in Africa and in the Middle East. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Africa is a hostage in the war with Russia, which has contributed to rising food prices on the continent. African countries are acutely affected by this growing crisis, which has sent prices of grains, cooking oils, fuel, and fertilizers soaring. In a speech to African Union leaders, Mr. Zelensky said the continent had been caught up in a situation not of its making.
I address you in a state of emergency when we have a war, an emergency for the whole world, when Africa is actually taking hostage of those who started the war against our states. This war may seem very distant to you and your countries, but catastrophically, rising food prices have already brought it home to millions of African families, as well as to many families in Asia, Europe, Latin America. The unjust and provoked by the Russian war level of food prices is painfully felt on all continents. Unfortunately, this can become a particular problem for your country. We need to take into account various factors: population growth on the African continent, the ongoing economic recovery after the pandemic, the lack of domestic financial resources in many countries to buy food at much higher prices, given the physical shortage in the global market. Some countries on the African continent find it particularly difficult to maintain the necessary food supplies.
Still ahead on the program. In keeping with health and well-being, the United Nations celebrates International Yoga Day. Welcome back to the program. UN Special Representative for South Sudan, Nicholas Haysom, says despite delays, he strongly believes that the only viable course of action remains the implementation of a revitalized agreement in the country. Briefing the UN Security Council, Mr. Haysom said that with the April 3rd agreement between the government, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement and the South Sudan Opposition Alliance on the implementation of transitional security arrangement, that the leaders have shown that they can make real progress in the country.
With the agreement of 3rd of April, which I've referred to, the South Sudanese leaders have shown that they can make real progress when there is a sense of urgency and determination. It is therefore our expectation that the parties to the peace agreement, with the same sense of urgency, will now agree on a roadmap as jointly called for by the African Union, IGAD, RJMAC and the United Nations. This roadmap should serve to recommit the parties to the revitalized peace agreement and must be accompanied by clear benchmarks and timelines. It should especially address the completion of outstanding tasks such as the graduation and deployment of the necessary unified forces, the approval of pending key legislation for the constitution-making process and national elections, as well as critical reforms of the security, judicial and financial sectors. I'd like to reaffirm that despite delays, I believe that the only viable course of action remains the implementation of the revitalized agreement in letter and spirit.
A British subsidiary of the mining company Glencore has pleaded guilty in a UK court to corruption offences after being accused of paying millions of dollars in bribes to secure access to crude oil in Africa. The UK's Serious Fraud Office said Glencore had, via its employees and agents, paid bribes of more than $28 million in Nigeria, Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, Equatorial Guinea and South Sudan. Well, sentencing is expected to take place in November. The Swiss-based multinational has already said it expects to pay up to $1.5 billion to settle allegations of bribery. Well, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has denied opposition claims of interfering with the country's judiciary amid delays in the presentation of the final report of a corruption inquiry. The commission, headed by Justice Raymond Zondo, investigated allegations of widespread corruption in South Africa during former President Jacob Zuma's 9 years in power, known as state capture. Well, it has already handed over its first, second, third and fourth reports and was due to present the final part of its findings by last Wednesday. Well, this has, however, been delayed several times amid allegations of interference. A statement by the presidency said Mr. Zondo had communicated last Thursday on the delay and undertook to finalize the report as soon as possible. The commission then said it would deliver it by Sunday evening. Mr. Ramaphosa says they have now agreed with the commission to a tentative date of Wednesday, 22nd June, for the report to be handed over. Hundreds of residents of South Africa's Soweto township have taken to the streets for a second day to protest over the lack of electricity supply to their area. Motorists and commuters in Soweto have had to brace themselves for a second day of disruptions amid threats of a shutdown. The group of residents from Pimville and Kiltsproot areas of Soweto are taking their protest over a lack of service delivery, a long-standing dispute over electricity, as well as calls for the removal of informal settlements across the township to the office of the mayor of Johannesburg. Well, the group, organized under the Soweto Parliament, have met Mayor Falatse in Bramfontein, where they presented her with a memorandum of demands. Fuel price inflation has caused alarm in South Africa that the government and the central bank have been taking action to soften the impact on consumers. Well, for Fezile Dlamini, it was imperative to address this issue in an environmentally and friendly and sustainable way, and has come up with an alternative solution, a three-wheel electric scooter.
South Africa's delivery bike game may have just gotten an electric jolt with this three-wheel electric scooter. Dlamini is the founder and CEO of Green Scooter, which sells and leases these scooters and also provides a so-called last-mile home delivery services to small businesses such as fast food outlets in Johannesburg's townships. The scooters, which resemble tuk-tuks, with a stylized design of curved lines, are manufactured locally with a Swedish firm acting as a technical partner. Dlamini came up with the idea for Green Scooter after his job applications were rejected by Uber.
Power is an issue. So it doesn't really directly affect me, but it does affect my sales, because when people think, they'll have range anxiety, that, oh, what if I go to this place and there's no energy? So, I mean, you know, when I built the business in survival mode. And I always encourage it with all of my clients, is that always think in survival mode in the event that you may not have power in a particular day. Or look at an alternative. Some guys have purchased their own UPS, and, you know, you're charging in this particular unit, it's a 4 kilowatt battery. In our latest unit size, it's a 5.1 kilowatt hour battery. People are literally now using those, and they're taking power into their own hands, literally.
Petrol and diesel prices have gone up by a third in South Africa in the past 12 months and are forecast to accelerate further, prompting the Treasury to extend cuts in fuel levies and the central bank to raise interest rates.
The townships is a place for me that sits close to home, because when would the township ever have seen electric vehicles actually operating, where people can use the vehicles to generate an income and take more money back home because they don't have those fossil fuel troubles.
Green Scooter has sold or leased 60 vehicles since it launched in 2018, and the pace has accelerated in recent months as fuel prices have soared. Dlamini says his target was to reach 160 units by November. The scooters can be charged from ordinary electric sockets, which Dlamini says makes them practical as well as an environmentally friendly alternative to the motorbikes commonly used by other last-mile delivery operators.
Let's look at the environment on its own. I mean, a lot of things that are happening in the world from a global warming perspective, it's not our fault. But if you can contribute towards fixing it, if you can contribute towards empowering and elevating your own society, then that's why I'm doing it. I mean, it's a socially impactful business.
South Africa has struggled for several years with electricity shortages that sometimes result in load shedding or planned power cuts. Dlamini said electric scooter users could overcome this challenge by using uninterrupted power supply units, devices that can store electricity when the power is on and for it to be used when it is off. For customers, it was exactly what they were looking for.
I used it because of accessibility. It went to places like Soweto. You could order from Soweto, Alex, you know. Those places, like, when in lockdown, it wasn't on Uber Eats and all of that. So it was very convenient.
He said his advice to his clients was to always think in survival mode and plan ahead.
Or in keeping with the spirit of promoting a sustainable lifestyle in harmony with planet Earth, the 8th International Yoga Day celebration has taken place at the UN headquarters with the theme Yoga for Humanity. United Nations recognizes the ancient practice as a holistic approach to health and well-being and a powerful tool for dealing with the myriad stresses brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The word yoga means union. Yoga is about being in an experience in which you and the rest of the existence are not separate things. Now, if you do the yoga practices, definitely these benefits will come. You will become more mentally balanced, you'll become physically healthy, but it's a little bit like driving an airplane around on the streets. Yes, you can use it as a bus if you want, but yoga has the potential to take you into the sky.
Being disciplined has its payoffs, and being undisciplined has its effects and its consequences, and you realize that, you know? And so I think what yoga gives is that it gives us tools to make that discipline something pleasurable, actually, because people hear the word discipline and they think, oh, this is going to be boring, or this is going to be too intense, I can't handle it. But yoga and all of its different asana, meditations, pranayama, etc., it actually gives something that makes this discipline attractive and pleasurable and good for you.
We have to breathe to be alive, but being aware of the breath and taking deep breaths, I think when you have mental illness, the breath is everything. When anxiety is prevalent, when fear is prevalent, then return your awareness to the breath, to deep breathe. And also movement. Of course, Hatha yoga is the yoga of movement. So moving your body and being aware of the breath at the same time, I think could really serve people who are struggling with mental illness.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.